To your calls, I'm joined now by Andy Burnham, Mayor of Greater Manchester, to talk about the train situation to, from and in the north of England and beyond into Scotland as well. Good afternoon to you, Andy Burnham.
Good afternoon, Sheila.
I was moved by your plea on Twitter this morning going, I know there's a lot going on, but the train situation in the north cannot be ignored. And you're right, it can't be ignored. And I tweeted out my own example this weekend. It's one example, but it's a good one because I think it's repeated many, many, many times over. I was meant to go to Liverpool this weekend to go to the Shakespeare at North and
which is brilliant, by the way.
Yes, I can't wait to see it. Yeah. Cancelled because two family members at the weekend before, back and forth for the Everton game and for different reasons, caught out massively, the weekend ruined, la la la. And that's repeated so many thousands of times over, isn't it?
They're ruining people's lives, Sheila, the railway industry. And more than that, they're crushing our economy. And they can't be allowed just to carry on doing it day after day. You mentioned your family. Well, my other half went to the train station this morning and just texted me saying, I'm going to have to drive to Manchester. Everything's cancelled. But that's the daily experience of thousands and thousands of people across the Northwest. They are just cancelling services one after another.
And it is.
Bear in mind, this is on a reduced timetable as well. So they asked for the permission to reduce services so they could bring so-called stability. Well, they just haven't done it. Well, it's partly their responsibility, but it is also the government's responsibility, because I think part of the problem here is they put the railway companies in a financial straitjacket post-pandemic, and there's just simply not the money in the contracts now to pay for the rest day working and all that they have run the railway with over the years, and hence we're seeing this meltdown at the moment.
And it isn't just Avanti. I was talking about Avanti services, but TransPennine Express have got their difficulties as well. There were doubts about the future development, which is another question. But dealing with the here and now, when it comes to the head of public affairs, I think, for Avanti was in front of the Commons Select Committee earlier this week or the tail end of last week, asked why they don't have enough drivers. Didn't know. I mean, that doesn't bode well, does it, for a place being managed well?
It really, really doesn't. I just think there's been a colossal management failure here. And they've kind of run the services in a threadbare way, haven't they? They've not brought in enough staff, and they've been managing that with rest day working. And when that has kind of hit difficulties, now we see the meltdown. If you just so people don't think we're just whinging Northerners, Sheila, if I could, just to show with TransPennine, which is obviously a critical service across the north, it's currently running at 2/3 punctuality. So a third of trains are not arriving on time. Worse, a fifth of trains are being cancelled. That is massive. And I don't mean this in a sort of north-south sort of rivalry point, but I just say if that was the service that was being provided in and out of London, people would be up in arms, wouldn't they?
Well, it was with Southern, and you're right. People were up in arms, and something like a solution was found. But that was ruining people's lives. I spoke to people at the time whose marriages were foundering because of the pressure of not getting home on time and not helping with the kids and all the rest of it, because people were stranded in London routinely.
Honestly, it's massive, the impact that they're having on people's lives. In the north of England now, I would go as far as to say people can't trust the trains. So we're beginning to see traffic go beyond pre-pandemic levels. People are driving because it's just safer. They feel more confident they'll get there. But that's no recovery, is it, from the pandemic? If it's a car-led recovery, I mean, where will that get us in the long run? And I get the emotion behind the tweet that you picked up on this morning was something around the fear that this is just becoming shrug of the shoulders. This is it. Well, get on with it. And we can't allow that to happen. I heard the last caller talking about, standards in government, and God, we could fill a lot of hours on that at the moment, couldn't we? But where's the kind of requirement on ministers to fix things gone? I was a minister and I would have rightly been dragged over the coals if this was the performance of a service that I was responsible for. And yet it just seems now that people can point the finger in different directions and nothing changes. It just isn't good enough. If the government wants to run the country, if it wants to stay in power, well, surely start fixing things is a legitimate call from here, isn't it? They promised to level us up after all. Look at the state of the railway.
Well, on levelling up,
in meltdown.
On levelling up, and some of the Northern Powerhouse, measures that we talk about frequently. how concerned are you that these eye-watering, difficult decisions that Jeremy Hunt has spoken about in the context of cuts might mean that the little that is happening stops happening?
Well, a couple of things to say on that, Sheila. So I saw in the Commons yesterday that the new Chancellor was asked directly about the commitment made by the Prime Minister to build a new railway line for the North, a cross-rail for the North, if you like, whether that still stood. And he very noticeably wouldn't give that commitment, which was, a core promise at the 2019 election. If you then just look at it more broadly in terms of day-to-day public spending for transport, they're now hearing doom and gloom, aren't we? So there's going to be, huge cuts. Well, you cannot in this moment cut public transport outside of London and then have a credible story about growth, which they claim to say they want to be a government about growth. Well, you just won't get it. In fact, I come back to the point I made. I think the state of public transport right now is crushing our economy. It's draining the life out of it, certainly from a visitor economy point of view, the chaos that we see on Avanti. And some things are just essential and they have to be invested in to a certain level to then create a foundation for a productive, growing economy. And so I am really worried actually about the noises that I'm hearing. In a cost of living crisis, you cannot start pulling back public spending, making life even harder for people. But then seeing a collapse of public transport.
And it's going to be interesting to see when these cuts come. It'll be interesting to see the geographical spread of them, won't it? We began by talking about Shakespeare North. What we don't want to see again is austerity North, because
we can't take it.
No.
Sheila, if I could just give you an honest take from my perspective. If I look at, say, for instance, the fire service for which I'm responsible, we got told a few weeks ago by the Home Office there was no extra funding for a pay settlement. So we've tried our best to put on the table as much as we can afford at local level. And it looks like that will be rejected because it won't meet the cost of living pressure that firefighters have. And bear in mind, they are really struggling because they've had no real terms increases for many, many years now. So what's the government going to do? Is it just going to let a crucial public service go into a dispute over the winter? A winter when people are going to be at risk in their own homes if they're using candles or paraffin because they won't put the heating on. What is happening here? Where is the will in the government to fix things, sit round the table, kind of put solutions on the table? And I'm sorry to the new Chancellor, but it is going to require investment. You can't get the country safely through a cost of living crisis without putting funding in to get pay settlements that will keep crucial public services running. Nurses, the Royal College of Nursing, balloting for the first time in their history
to go out on strike.
That is a sign of how severe things are.
And just finally, if you would, I was listening to the TUC speaking today, Francis O'Grady, leader of the TUC, basically telling a story of doom, really, about what workers are facing and what their only response can be at this point. Do you expect a so-called winter of discontent?
Well,
and then some?
I think we're heading straight into one, Sheila, and the Conservative Party all of the time has sought to create the mythology about the winter of discontent in the 70s. We are looking at a much worse one as it stands right now, because we're looking at critical emergency services being in dispute in a cost of living crisis, as I say, when millions of people are at risk in their homes and in their communities. This is a dire situation, and I don't think the government has even begun to wake up to some of these issues. They need to look themselves in the mirror, the Conservative Party. Do they still want to run this country? Have they got what it takes to still run this country? Is there the unity to run this country? And if they can't answer those questions positively, they should give up on power now and make way for a government that will run this country.
Okay, Andy Burnham, thank you, Mayor of Greater Manchester, for joining me. It's very nearly 3:50.